Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our monthly BCAC Youth Learning Series webinar. I will be your host, Alicia. We have a special guest joining us today who is very passionate about today's topic. If you joined us during our last webinar, we scratched the surface on the subject of air mobility, and today we'll be taking a deeper look into what the next 2 to 5 years could look like for aviation. We'll be discussing advanced aerial mobility such as Vtol aircraft and new operational styles. And for those that missed our previous webinars or would like to rewatch them, please visit our BCAC website under the Resources tab and select the links. If you have any questions for JR, please submit them into the chat. We'll be dedicating around 30 minutes to answer questions since there was a lot of interest on this topic during our last webinar. If you have a topic in mind that you would like us to discuss for our next webinar, please leave a comment in the chat or email us at info@bcaviationcouncil.org. As usual, before we start, just a quick reminder that the webinar will be recorded and to please turn off your mics. Thank you. Here with us today, we have JR Hammond, who is the CEO and founder of Canadian Air Mobility, which specializes in creating the marketplace for hydrogen and electrical vertical takeoff landing vehicles. He is Vancouver-based and is spearheading the efforts for Canadian Air Mobility to be the hub for global air mobility companies to use Vancouver as a gateway into Canada. JR successfully hosted the Canadian inaugural Air Mobility Roundtable in Vancouver, which brought the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, academia, industry, investors, and regulators together to launch the roadmap of air mobility in Canada. So everybody, please welcome JR.
Excellent, Alicia. Thank you so much for that introduction, and good afternoon to everyone from beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada today, and specifically to the BC Aviation Council for facilitating the discussion today. So thanks for the introduction as well. I am JR Hammond, and I'm wearing actually two hats today. Primarily, I'm the founder and CEO of Canadian Air Mobility, and we've expanded a lot of our mandate into really being the environmental and social activist investor through joint ventures and equity into the advanced air mobility ecosystem, specifically within the Canadian context. Now, if you bring it to a little bit of a higher level, so we're understanding the definition that we'll be using for advanced air mobility today, we define it as the electric and hydrogen-powered flying vehicles and aircraft, specifically with those that have the vertical takeoff and landing capacity, commonly referred to as E or H VTOLs, those that are specific for landing on short or remote locations, commonly referred to as STOLs, and those for conventional takeoff and landing integration opportunities within existing aviation locations, commonly referred to as CTOLs. The important thing to know is that advanced air mobility is our general umbrella term, and it's commonly partnered, and we continue to build bridges with the UAS or drone industry, focusing more on the micro applications and transferring those learnings, knowledge, insight, and safety regulations into the more complex and larger use cases, commonly falling under the advanced air mobility terminology. My second hat here today is actually as the executive director of the not-for-profit Advanced Air Mobility Consortium that we formed here in Canada. I'll be speaking about both aspects today, but I wanted to extend an invite to all of those that once we are safe to travel again, please feel free to come stop by and visit us in beautiful Vancouver, pictured here in my slide, as we move towards the digital conversations to face-to-face conversations in the future. I wanted to begin by acknowledging that I am broadcasting from the unceded and traditional ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people of the Squamish, Musqueam, Kitquetlem, Katsi, Kwantlen, Sinahomi nations, among many others. I continue to be honored and privileged to leverage our platform and ecosystem here in Canada to further curate the integration of Indigenous wisdom into the equitable and inclusive use of our air resources, especially with the expansion into the new advanced air mobility space. Now, for introductions and intentions today, so I'm going to set out my intention that was a lot of the foundational pieces that formed Canadian Air Mobility, and fundamentally it comes down to this. I am here today to create a team of like-minded individuals to further the vision of living, breathing, and being a part of the advanced air mobility solution in Canada. Now, when we dive into this a little bit more, we talk about why air mobility? What was the motivation and drive for bringing advanced air mobility into the Canadian context, and what does that actually look like? I'm going to start off a little bit more on a personal note, and then it'll be built into more of the macro ecosystem that we've been able to create and facilitate within the Canadian context. It starts with the passion for aviation, which I believe is a common thread between the attendees that we have here today. Aviation for myself represented the opportunity to lean into the global connectedness in discovering new cultures, new language, and really building on the positives that this beautiful world has to offer, which always started the new adventures with entering an airplane and having the experience at the airport. This has created the passion of connecting this global world together and really seeing the good that aviation provides in being that catalyst for the positive to come on the planet. Now, growing up, what this was conflicted by on my passion for aviation was my motivation and drive for sustainability. Here, you'll actually see a photo that I took when I was living over in Shanghai, China for 2.5 years from 2014 to 2016. And this is a photo of the China Southern airplane at Shanghai's Pudong Guojijichang, commonly referred to as Shanghai's Pudong International Airport, on really the focus on what aviation was playing in our world in terms of sustainability and our contribution towards climate change. So this passion for aviation really conflicted on a fundamental basis for me and what I call my 3 strikes that the universe sent me living in Shanghai. Number 1 was walking out of my apartment on a daily basis, having the pollution so thick that you would take a look at the street light 100 meters down the road from you and just see the thick cloud of pollution that when you take your breath in, it's the burn in the lungs, it's the burn in the throat, and so much so that you can see the silt and contaminants build up on your skin from just walking around the city on a daily basis. Number 2, on that similar day, came when I entered the metro system within Shanghai, which is about a massive, massive metro system located on average about 5 to 6 floors underground of the city. And the pollution that specific day had been so thick that when you looked to the end of the platform underground, you could see the pollution had seeped down all the way and had actually created a haze within the underground platform. That was my strike 2 for the day. My strike 3 really came when I arrived at my university later that afternoon, and we were on the 3rd floor and all of the windows had been opened all day for cleaning. And so that pollution had seeped into the classroom, and I sat there trapped in the class, feeling those contaminants on a breathing in and breathing out basis. And so the universe, being that 3-strike aspect, really presented this opportunity of saying, I needed to start making changes today to ensure that this problem was not experienced for this generation to come and the next 10 generations beyond me. And what really clicked in for me was that the people experiencing this issue right now already have the reality that that problem is moving across the Pacific and could be in the backyard of our beautiful blue skies that we have in British Columbia if significant changes aren't made. So what did I do with that? That was the motivation and that was the fire. And what quickly came out of that was realizing the possibility for transforming. The introduction of electric and hydrogen aviation, specifically with the terminology of urban air mobility, or those to access our dense urban centers, provided this beautiful intersection of bringing aviation and sustainability together, which had never been experienced before in the past to this level. Through the money and development coming out of Silicon Valley, it started creating a narrative of what this transforming possibility could be. Here you'll notice a photo. This is the Airbus Vahana, which unfortunately is not flying anymore, but showcasing the different aspects of where these vehicles can be applied with their rotating propeller wings, giving it the ability for the vertical takeoff and landing capacity in an electric fashion. Similarly, we had narratives coming from Uber on their developing of the Uber Elevate platform on showcasing what new vertiports, new integrations of communities could be like as this urban air mobility concept really brought together not just the vertical aspect, but how are we integrating this with existing infrastructure, public transportation methods, creating these intermodal societal opportunities for bringing aviation and the 3D space above our cities, above our regional areas, to a better connected society. Now, what we focus on at Canadian Air Mobility is building this vision of advanced air mobility. Specifically, these are the basis and framework that we use to ensure the correct integration of this technology into our society and to ensure it's not just the upper 1% that benefit from this advancement in aviation. We've built these principles off of work with our founding members of TransLink, of YVR, and many other individuals that have strong community engagement aspects in showcasing what is needed to be positive community members and to ensure this technology is a step upwards for society and not just a lucrative technology on the top of the echelon. Equitability, inclusiveness, and resiliency in conjunction with intermodal, accessibility, and zero-emission aircraft. We know that sustainability is the core of expanding the role and rebuilding our recovery phase throughout this pandemic, and that is a strong foundational principle that we will continue moving on going forward. Entwined with all of these is the safety aspect. We know the incredibly high reputation that the aviation industry has on the safety piece, and we are driving to not only maintain that, but to ensure it continues to exceed those standards as we integrate new air mobility opportunities. Now, what does this look like in the terms of different air mobility business areas? Well, we focus our efforts on 3 different revenue generating opportunities. Number 1 is on the passenger aspect. And this is what you'll hear the most about in the media side on showcasing the air taxi, the air metro, the airport shuttle services opportunities. It's the most one that's media publicized. However, on the British Columbia aspect, what we've been focusing on is some of these initial revenue generating use cases actually is coming from the air services or the cargo aspect. Air services really provides an opportunity to build those connective pieces with unique niche areas that can satisfy where we want to build upon for health, medical, connective or remote or indigenous communities in areas that conventionally have been challenging or cost prohibitive for bringing in this technology. Similarly, on the cargo aspect, there are many pieces of the cargo side where we can facilitate the movement of more efficient areas, the dense urban pieces within cities or rural pieces for the movement of goods and services within those areas. Now, fortunately, we've had the privilege of having the city of Vancouver as an air mobility catalyst, having some of the foundational agreements for, yes, building out a correct framework here in British Columbia, but really establish that framework for the rest of the country moving forward. Number 1, it has been Vancouver and British Columbia's sustainability response. Enacting the climate emergency response from the city of Vancouver back in 2019 has created the stimulus to bring in and decarbonize transportation as an action item within their plan to ensure Vancouver and the province of British Columbia is resilient against future climate change movements. Secondarily, the operational excellence. We have an urban helicopter operation within Vancouver and British Columbia, be it HeliJet, the progress making from Harbour Air on their electric flights, the incredible work done from Vtol Air and JR Fraser through the connectivity pieces of Indigenous and remote communities. The excellence is here within the province, and the opportunity to move to that next phase is ripe and ready for opportunity and ready for movement. Lastly, it's our geography and ecosystem. The waterways and public interest on showcasing how technology can move forward in the advanced air mobility space gives us a unique ecosystem and geography to really make the business and use cases for introducing this technology. What have we done so far? Well, this vision started about 1.5 years ago as we really focused on bringing the different members together and having a conversation about how advanced air mobility could play out in the Vancouver space. It had to be the associations from industry, academia, the national regulators and research aspect, government, and investors coming together to ensure that we had a diverse, inclusive conversation on some of the pieces that we needed in order to move this forward. What we're excited about is this is a starting point on the Vancouver aspect. Similar conversations have already been developed with our consortium on the Toronto, Ontario basis, and as we expand to Atlantic Canada as well. Now, what does our ecosystem look like? Well, we have 3 different levels to it. We have our general ecosystem, which is really focused on creating the information, education, and awareness of the opportunities that are on the horizon here in our Canadian context with the aviation industry. We host a quarterly meeting specifically designed as an open invitation to bring in, recruit any individuals interested on gaining insight, gaining awareness, and finding out how they can play a stronger role into that next narrative of this technology. Secondarily, we have our consortium members who have committed both financial, operational expertise into the advanced air mobility vision, and we meet with them on every second month to really drive some of these structures and working processes for bringing this technology into the Vancouver space. And lastly, we have our executive committee, and this is the strategy, partnerships, financial, legal, and expansion opportunities on showcasing what guidance is necessary as we continue to move forward. Now, I'm excited to announce, as we talk about more of the structure of the ecosystem and where this technology could be applied, the tangible use case that we're actually studying at this moment. We've launched the world's first triple bottom line feasibility study for an electric vertical takeoff and landing, or eVTOL operation, between Vancouver and Victoria. We've brought in the experts of Bright Spot Climate to lead an environmental life cycle assessment. We brought in the economic powerhouse of Nexa Capital Partners out of the States to really drive the spurring of the economic impact assessment of what this technology can provide. The visual and noise disturbance professionals from HMMH, the incredible social and engagement side from Moving in a Livable Region, Simon Fraser's Center for Dialogue, on showcasing what we need to have in public engagement and social interaction to showcase the important conversations before bringing in advanced air mobility. And lastly, T Design, bringing the narrative and creating a digestible, unique opportunity for showcasing to those that are not in the aviation industry how this technology is relatable to them. How are they going to be involved in the progress as we move forward? So the specific operation we're looking at is actually a movement of cancer isotopes that are produced at Vancouver's General Hospital that are needed to be transported to Victoria's Royal Jubilee Hospital. So we set up an analysis going on that triple bottom line, the environmental, economic, and social aspect, evaluating number 1, those cancer isotopes being transported in this number 1 scenario here, only via ground transport. Number 2, that's in the partnership with Helijet for moving them from Vancouver's downtown heliport to Victoria's Ogden Point. And then number 3, looking at the opportunities with an actual implementation of an eVTOL, moving directly from hospital to hospital. Just for reference, one of the pieces that is a little bit unique about this case and why it provides opportunity, our Vancouver General Hospital is located here with this red star in the top part of the slide, and a conventional ground transportation goes through the dense urban areas carrying radioactive isotopes through this urban area down to our Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, then transported across to Swartz Bay and trucked additionally down to Victoria's Royal Jubilee Hospital, located at this red star down here. What we need to know is that time is of the essence, given the half-life of these isotopes, which provide less isotopes actually being used for treating of cancer patients upon arrival in Victoria. The helicopter solution provided by Helijet has been a great improvement for the movement of the isotopes down to from the heliport to heliport, but still has a ground transportation aspect going from heliport to hospital. What we really hope to show in this study is on this unique case, how an eVTOL solution, leveraging electric technology, quieter and more efficient operations, can actually move from the hospital direct to hospital in providing more opportunities for cancer patients to be treated and less overall of the material to be produced. Now, on top of that, this is only one of the use cases as we talk about the advanced air mobility side. Of course, the beautiful developments coming out of Harbour Air in December of 2019, in conjunction with their partnership with magniX, really putting the stake on the planet for how we can advance air mobility in terms of electric and hydrogen-powered aircraft. This movement really showcased the years and years of work that Canada has been doing in facilitating this aviation movement and put a claim or stake on the world map on how we can progress this forward as a community. Now, what we're trying to do on our aspect is we know that the work that in British Columbia is not a singular defined area. We really see that electric aviation and hydrogen aspect needs to be a global collaboration. This is why we have continued to lean into connections across the Cascadia corridor, which is that of the state of Oregon, the state of Washington, and here in British Columbia, where we have a natural movement of employees, people, goods, and services. And some of the largest locations of massive companies such as your Intel, Boeing, Amazon, Microsoft, Electronic Arts Games, Nike, etc., naturally moving through this innovation corridor. And so what we're trying to leverage in that same sense is how do we evaluate what Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland present as the future for Cascadia? How is advanced air mobility going to create a stronger corridor in conjunction with the existing transportation problems that we experience both on the cross-border side and the movement between those three major cities? There's lots of talk about the high-speed rail within this area too. Our goal is not to be a competition to the high-speed rail, but really focus on that collaborative, integrative piece where advanced air mobility can stack up on top of that major solution. Similar with our conversations and partners with TransLink, we are looking at integrating this as a complement to public transportation systems, not as a competitive side. Being at the nascent part of this technology, we know we do not have the people moving capacity to have the transfer compared to an existing SkyTrain or bus system. But there are very unique niche areas, such as moving across waterways, connecting in dense or rural or deserted areas, that advanced air mobility can provide that unique solution to. Now, as we expand that more in the international aspect, what we've been really leaning into is not having to create all of these platforms, regulations, safety certifications from ground upwards, but identifying partnerships where these platforms exist and are thriving around the world. One of our most recent ones has been, we're in the final pieces of signing on the Nordic Zero Emission Aviation Partnership, which the countries of Denmark, Finland, Norway, Iceland, and Sweden have started in putting in legislation towards zero emission aviation for domestic flights by 2040 within each of their regions. This is a massive movement on the global context that the Nordic Network for Electric Aviation is willing and wanting to collaborate with us on the Canadian context on helping legislatures, helping operators, airport authorities, and future employees to this industry showcase what the different opportunities could be with domestic flights in the British Columbia context. So what does this look like for the next steps on bringing advanced air mobility into Canada? Well, I'm going to change up the process a little bit, typically where we'd move to a general question and answer side, as I've covered some of the high pieces. And I'm going to go into what I've called a vulnerability rumble, which I've been learning more from my work as an entrepreneur and trying to bring these new visions to reality, coming from the work from Brene Brown, who's been an absolutely fantastic individual, showcasing the different aspects of what it means to lean into vulnerability in conjunction with asking questions and leading into answers. So I'm going to speak a little bit now as a raw, vulnerable human being, which is what I strongly believe our world is so deeply needing at this moment, especially as we talk about change and opportunities for the future. You know, we are facing some tough times right now, each of us having our stories, our traumas, our impacts, and our challenges that we face day in and day out. And what I'm going to share is adapted a little bit from the book Dare to Lead from Brene Brown, which has really resonated with me as I've tried to overcome some of these challenges of not only creating a company, creating a vision, and having that span on the digital aspect during a global pandemic. So at the heart of daring is a deeply human truth that is rarely acknowledged. Courage and fear are not mutually exclusive. Most of us feel brave and afraid at the exact same time. We feel vulnerable, sometimes all day long. And during those moments when we're pulled between our fear and our call to courage in creating new, leading the next adventure going forward, we need shared language, skills, tools, and daily practices that can support us through the messy parts that life gives us. So the word rumble has become more than just a way to say, let's have a real conversation, even if it's tough. It's become a serious intention setter and a behavioral cue or reminder. A rumble is a discussion, conversation, or meeting defined by commitment to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, and to stick with the messy middle part of problem identification and solving, to take a break and circle back when necessary, and to be fearless in owning our parts. And as the psychologist Harriet Lerner teaches to us, listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. Open hearts and open minds are critical if we want to be brave. Remember, it's not fear that gets in the way of courage. It's the armor we build up around our hearts. It's the way we self-protect, shut down, and start posturing when we're in fear. Today, we are constantly bombarded with fear, uncertainty, self-doubt, and worry about what the next step is going to be. I want to extend this first part of this vulnerability rumble with a story that brought me here today as an example of a first step in leaning into this vulnerability rumble. So back in 2016, I had the absolute privilege to work for the inspirational CEO and mentor, Suzanne West of Imaginary Energy, a clean technology company based in Calgary. At the young age of 22, she was the one who taught me the importance of creating ecosystems and companies that foster the change from the conventional patriarchal definition of leadership, typically the power over side, to that of the matriarchal one, leadership with, leadership to, and leadership within. This created the teams and powerful connections among human beings en route to obtaining audacious moonshot goals. Specifically, this matriarchal definition revolved around creating spaces of leadership where we feel comfortable challenging assumptions and long-held beliefs, pushing against the status quo, and asking if there aren't other ways to achieve the highest common good together. Imaginea and Suzanne were literally creating a new way of doing business. Suzanne's vision and mission for changing this world for good inspired me and ignited the kindling within me to wake up each morning knowing that I was working towards not only making this world a better place today, but ensuring we walked lighter on this planet for generations to come. As a serial entrepreneur and fearless leader, she installed the motto of creating a company that allows its people to be the best human beings possible. As a direct result of that, they will be the best employees. Suzanne was the first one to lead by example and teach me the following phrase: each morning, I choose courage over comfort. Each morning, I choose courage over comfort. In January of 2018, Suzanne was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. A short 3 months later, on March 6th of 2018, I lost not only Suzanne, the human being, but my friend, mentor, visionary, CEO, and inspiration for showing up each day to a space that she had created in working towards making this world a better place. As a result of her passing, the investors of Imaginea decided to sell off the company, and with it, my dreams and hopes and career of working in the clean tech space. This was my reality at the time, a new low, ripe for pivotal change. Now, I share this story not seeking sympathy, not seeking attention, but rather as creating a space for us all to realize the tragedies, traumas, and hardships we face in life, be it death, illness, mental struggles, in conjunction with the COVID-19 pandemic. Sharing these stories with our communities allows us to learn into the vulnerable aspects of life and create the foundational basis we need for solving the tasks and challenges at hand. Our aviation industry is not going to be the same. We have seemingly insurmountable challenges and hurdles ahead of us that make it seem easier to throw in the towel, pack up, and head off. When we're facing these challenging, complex environments that force us into vulnerability, the question becomes, are we willing to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome? Are we willing to create courageous spaces so we can lean into vulnerability? To emphasize, vulnerability is not weakness. It is the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we face every day, which we know with this current pandemic is not optional. Our only choice is a question of engagement. Our willingness to own and engage with our vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. The level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. When you shut down vulnerability, you shut down the possibility of opportunity. So I'm here today with all of you to commit that I'm taking my step into leaning into vulnerability. I'm embracing the role of how we will take this vision for advanced air mobility and play a part in redefining society, both locally, nationally, and internationally. Today, I will choose courage over comfort. I can't make any promises for tomorrow, but today I will choose to be brave. I will leave off with the invitation for everyone present. Each one of us here today holds unique value in creating the base for this ecosystem to form. Take a moment to see everyone here online and witness the importance of each and every person being present. Notice the step change in humanity for aviation that could stem from this initial conversation. This is your opportunity as professionals and incredible human beings to make an exponential leap forward into the next generation of transportation. I want to emphasize the human aspect as well. As individuals, we in this conversation today have the tools and capabilities to begin defining our transportation narratives of the future to come. We are the solution. We are here today. Embrace the excitement of this moment and let's get to work together. Leading off on the action points, as we come to a conclusion of my part of the event today, I will want to make sure that this is an open invitation for additional action points on how we can continue this narrative together. We're always open for additional membership in bringing this vision to reality. Our ecosystem continues to expand, and at the highest level, raising the awareness, raising the knowledge of what we're trying to do. We have an open quarterly digital house for all of those invited as an open invitation, scheduled for Friday, October 30th, 10 to 12 Pacific time, as an opportunity to continue the conversation and connect with others who are looking to make their role in the narratives of our transportation future going forward. So with that, I'll conclude the formal piece of this conversation. These slides will be available at the conclusion of the event, and feel free to reach out. My email is there, and I'll pass it over to Alicia and extend the thanks once again for the opportunity to speak here today.
Sorry, my mic was muted. Thank you, JR, for that great presentation and showing us a snapshot of what the future could look like. And thank you for being vulnerable. As an AME myself, I'm really interested in seeing how the maintenance of these new aircraft will change and adapt within the next couple of years. And the trend of sustainability is something that has become more and more popular in our industry. And I've also seen a lot of companies, small and large, that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint, which is great to see. So now we'll take the remaining time that we have to answer some questions that we received from the audience. So the first question we have, are you planning to automate the flight operation of these aircrafts? If yes, how will you ensure the safety in the air as traffic increases, operating within the concrete jungle with so many obstructions?
Fantastic point on that. So for our plans and what we've been working along with a lot of the vehicle manufacturers throughout the world, 95% of the models will be piloted initially. They're expecting an inflection point by about the 2030 time when the majority of the piloted models will move to that of an autonomous side. However, the safety is of paramount for the initial operations. Therefore, the only chance that we'll have in working in conjunction with the incredible individuals at NAV Canada, Transport Canada, already on the work on the RPAS side, is showcasing how we can have initial opportunities within our framework and slowly expand in that crawl, walk, run approach to ensure the safe integrations as we progress forward. The simple answer behind that, though, is it is an intense amount of collaboration with the professionals and geniuses at NAV Canada and Transport Canada to continue to ensure that we have that safe ecosystem for when autonomy comes in the advanced air mobility piece.
Okay, awesome. We have another question here. How are you going to manage growing noise concerns over urban areas?
Excellent point. So noise pollution and visual disturbance is one of the highest paramounts in really that integration, ensuring that we're making a positive movement forward for society. This is not, advanced air mobility is not going to be ubiquitous, replace all solution in terms of public transportation or the way goods and services are moved. We have to ensure that the routes that are designed, where the vertiports or takeoff and landing areas are placed, has that social integration piece, so that we're doing both the quantitative and qualitative studies behind what an introduction of the technology can look like. We found out very quickly that there in Vancouver, we can leverage existing helicopter or float plane routes to ensure that we're reducing the overall noise profile rather than increasing upon it. But any additional routes have to go through an extensive framework on that environmental, social, and economic aspect before we even move into the actual implementation phase.
Okay. Another question here. If you're planning to hire pilots or remote operators, what plans do you have for their training? As we already seen in the entry experience standards for pilots, it's getting lower in the airlines.
This is an excellent point, and this is where I get the most excited about working with the operators and just listening to their vision, because we have an existing pilot base right now. As this technology increases, there's going to be still that demand for existing pilots and ensuring that the aviation industry continues to expand conventionally. But what I'm really excited about is all of these new opportunities that could be opening up, yes, on the remote pilot side, but as these new vehicles and new operators come together. So the advice that I provide right now is just stay curious. We're at the very nascent stages of this. There is not a defined path right now, and we're going to have to be uncomfortable with a good chunk of uncertainty in the short term before that becomes conventional and ingrained compared to our existing systems. So what I would recommend is just that curiosity. Lean into the exciting factors, leading into something that's tugging on your heartstrings on saying, I'm curious about discovering more about this, and start exploring. The best part about the exploring is there's no defined path. So you can design your own, and that can create you some unexpected opportunities along there.
Yeah, great. Another question. Do you envision the current occupational skills in Canada's current aviation and aerospace in the maintenance sector transferable to Canadian air mobility, such as avionics and aircraft maintenance, etc.?
Great question. And this is where I'll have to quote one of our partners at BCIT, Sonia Boskovich, who's leading the aerospace group there as one of the deans, has just been fantastic. I'm starting to develop that roadmap of how existing maintenance skill sets can be transferred into this new electric or hydrogen fuel cell space. And the exciting news coming out of all of her work is as she's prepping up the school for that training and education aspect, it is a great and beautiful path going forward. Not only is this an opportunity for the economic aspect of Canada, but for really upskilling into this next generation of aviation and not having a gap in both the learning, workforce, and talent aspect that we have in the Canadian context. So good tailwinds coming from that work from BCITs. And I know that that similar narrative can be applied to the other technical trade and maintenance learning opportunities across the country too.
Okay, that's really interesting. The next question, I guess it's a little bit similar. The CAA is currently working with industry to identify future skills and knowledge requirements. Do you know of new specific skills and or knowledge on the horizon?
Oh, that's a good broad question. I'm going to move away from identifying specific skills because as we all know, within the aviation aspect, it touches on so many areas. What I would really focus on is starting to explore what additional business lines can come into the aviation space that conventionally haven't been there. And one of the examples that I give is if you have a passion, let's say within the aviation sector, how are we smashing together public transportation with that as well? How are we smashing together real estate and the new developments of where we put urban air mobility opportunities or different connectivity points? What I would really focus on those skills is leveraging what we already have as human beings through our natural interactions in life and starting to apply that within the aviation space. So it doesn't need to necessarily be go back and get a whole nother degree, spend an existing amount of money on retraining, but adjusting what we currently have and applying that to the new opportunity. And the best part about that too is we have a blank canvas right now for how advanced air mobility could play out. Let's start looking at where opportunities can be played into with our existing skill sets that can aid a better and more positive, more societal, positive movement forward within the new industry.
Awesome. This one's a personal question, or personally for me. What does the new CEO of YVR, Tamara, think about sharing the airspace with Vtol aircraft, and what will that relationship look like?
So an incredible individual. Unfortunately, I have not had the privilege yet of meeting her face to face, but what we've been able to communicate on the vision side, especially as YVR is rolling out this new strategy on the local connectivity piece. You know, we've had the privilege of being the gateway to the Asia Pacific through via North America and YVR. What this new opportunity on the local connectivity piece is creating that new concept of what an airport can look like for both urban air mobility opportunities, regional air mobility opportunities, and how those connectivity pieces continue to hold that high degree of community engagement and a positive community player for YVR in the surrounding areas. So we are really excited to be a part of that vision development with YVR going forward, knowing that it's going to be a combination of, yes, the drone aspect, but the future development of a sustainable aviation aspect through eVTOLs, CTOLs, and STOLs. This is the work that YVR is committing to and being that hub and new transportation center going forward. So incredible work that Tamara is progressing, and I'm excited to continue being part of that brainstorming process.
That's very exciting. Sorry, another question. It's the year 2050. What does the world look like in terms of AAM/UAM?
2050. Oh, I love this. So talk to a visionary about thinking about the future and, get a good rabbit hole here. So one of the commitments that I've made with the consortium is we've submitted our first executive brief to the provincial government of British Columbia in showcasing a roadmap of moving towards zero emission aircraft operations within the province of British Columbia by 2040. So what we're leveraging is the beautiful platform that the BC government has under Clean BC for their zero emission vehicle side, and how we can extend the similar policies, work, and construction to that of the aviation space. What we want to build upon that is having the incredible amounts of battery technology and hydrogen fuel cell side increase in terms of energy capacity. We want that to extend to any flights operating within British Columbia and continue that narrative on a Canadian-wide basis. So the sustainability is at the highest priority for moving that forward, and then really showcasing, once we tap into an energy solution that's sustainable, what additional connectivity pieces does that look like for a province, for the Indigenous groups, for rural areas, for the development and design of cities where roads might not be as necessary as we thought in the past. What does reconverting roads to greenways look like? Can we have a statistic that not only reduces our carbon emission for aviation, but reducing kilometers of road to that of kilometers of greenways? So some really interesting aspects coming out once we solve that connectivity and energy piece. And I'm very, very positive about the future at 2050, I'm willing to put my effort, time, and energy into making that a reality much before then, hopefully.
That sounds all very exciting. Another question here. I'm curious to know if CMA is working with any manufacturers/companies that are currently working on VTOL prototypes. What is the prospect of working with them in Vancouver, in the Vancouver region?
Great question. So of course we are Canadian based and there's always a push for Canadian content. We, in partnership with the National Research Council out of their Ottawa's aerospace office, it has been excellent to really understand where the development of different technologies are in the Canadian space, leveraging their ISED program, the IRAP program on connecting small, medium-sized enterprises into our work. The exciting news is that there is a nascent yet growing space for the drone industry and the advanced air mobility industry here in Canada. There are some small eVTOL manufacturers dabbled throughout the country, and they're continuing to expand as we build on our work within the ecosystem. One of the key pieces, just as a caveat to that though, is we are really focusing on these initial phases on bringing in technology from around the world, knowing that there's been billions and billions of dollars put into the development, and showcasing how, yes, there's an operation opportunity here in Canada, but hopefully that gives us the step change education, knowledge, and research and development for not only manufacturing these future vehicles here, operating them, and then expanding on Canadian companies within our framework. So I would happily introduce, we have with our quarterly ecosystem meeting, there's a lot of the existing manufacturers here in Canada that attend, and it's a great opportunity to facilitate additional connections on that piece.
Perfect. Next question here. I suspect air mobility will have the most significant impact on general aviation. Is there a plan to collaborate with general aviation and integrate within the space rather than as a competition?
Very much so. And this is I love that, that word of the collaboration side. We know we will be fighting uphill all day long if we start staking claims for competition, especially as we know the radical changes that can happen from the integration of new technology. What we're really doing is working with individuals in the GA space to see how this technology could apply to their current operations. It's not a message of eliminating, striking, reducing our capital inefficiencies and moving forward. No, it's actually leveraging what we have initially and building upon that in preparation for the future-proofing aspect as sustainability requirements increase, as operational costs may increase. How are we utilizing a conversation of leaning into cooperation rather than competition? And of course, the change is always difficult. So it's facilitating conversation pieces on what that change could be and how to ensure an optimal and transitional piece.
So this is kind of just a thought, or I just wanted to get your opinion on it, but it was recently, there was a jetpack that was spotted flying at LAX. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I know the officials on the Los Angeles side were absolutely losing their marbles behind that. And this just quadruply doubles down on that safety impact. We really have to have a group mentality, a group effort into ensuring that the optimal, safe integration of the technology comes into our space so that we don't risk extremely catastrophic events occurring, such as what potentially could have happened on the Los Angeles side. And I know Transport Canada has been working diligently on their new drone regulations of really ensuring that that space is provided and the access to the airspace through the different programs and apps that they've created. This is going to be quintessential for ensuring that we remain positive in the public limelight going forward. We will be digging ourselves out of the grave for the next decade and a half to come if safety is compromised at any level. And so having that as the foundational basis from day one and ensuring that's not compromised is going to be the only way we'll have success moving forward.
Just another question here. How can we educate our young people differently to help drive the change in thinking we need to become more a sustainable industry?
And I'm going to go back to the curiosity point. You know, our society right now is at such an opportune time for change, and specifically pivotal change. it's really having those conversations and leaning into the vulnerability, as I was mentioning, about exploring something that's not the norm, providing the opportunity, support, and insight into those conversations, not only within our families, our small friend groups, but with our communities as well. And it's having positive narratives around that that really support the innovation and that development of creativity. So I'm just going to continue to double down on that kindness, the curiosity, and leading into those vulnerable communications, because that's where it starts. And if we can continue to have that, it's a really good ingredient that can spur a lot of other positive changes beyond just the aviation side, but as a foundational piece to a lot of those future pieces as well.
Another question here. I would love to hear a little more about the equitable and your commitment to decolonizing as you're decarbonized, and how you see centering Indigenous peoples.
A fantastic question. And this is where I'll acknowledge, first of all, I am at the very beginning steps of my learning process in this. I am by far nowhere on the expert side, but it has been a true privilege to, as I'm learning more, the more opportunities that are becoming available from different resources, both locally, across the country, and on the international basis, to expand this learning. And so let me just come from it from that aspect first. One of the initial pieces that I'm most excited about is we have existing operators within the BC context, specifically Vtol Air, who has been fantastic to just lean into an opportunity to learn where this technology could be applied. And the exciting part is we don't need to radically change around the aviation system for having meaningful, positive changes, especially during this COVID time. And the opportunity that presents itself as we're looking at the potential vaccination stage, where the government of Canada has the resources already purchased and supplied for moving into the vaccination stage. How are we ensuring the optimal, safe delivery of these materials to the entire province? And what does that look like in reducing human-to-human contact, doing it in a sustainable way? And as I use one of the quotes from the CEO of JR Hammond, really walk lighter on the land to ensure that we're progressing this interaction going forward. So for me, it's always an opportunity to walk in with an open mind and open heart about where the learnings can come from.
Great answer. So I think that wraps up our Q&A portion. I'd like to say thank you, JR, for joining us today, and to the viewers for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed today's topic, and we hope to see you again at our October webinar. So everybody, thank you and stay safe. Bye.
Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much.